Welcome to Stop Now, a social experiment where we stop, listen, and share. I am one of your hosts, Nate, and joining me, as always, is the man behind the mask, the voice of the voiceless, JK. JK, we've got a very special guest this week, but before we speak to our guest, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Nate. As you said, I'm behind the screen right now. So let's welcome a special guest, Maurice Edwards.
Yes. Maurice Edwards is joining us. Maurice, a child trafficking expert. He has been fighting the good fight for many, many years, and we are glad that you had some time to speak with us today, Maurice. How are you?
I'm doing well. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can, sir.
Okay. So sorry about the delay and not being in a good spot to be able to have this conversation with you guys. But as long as you can hear me well, I'm ready to go.
Yes, we can definitely hear you. And you know, it's sometimes it don't always work when you want it to, but it works when it needs to. So we glad we're able to talk to you today, man. Before we get started, can you let the audience know a little bit about your background and your experience and some of the things that you've done along the way?
Yeah, sure. So a little bit about my background. Where do I start? So I was a law enforcement officer for 17 years. As a law enforcement officer, I started working missing and endangered kids cases as a detective. And what I noticed was the young women that I was recovering them in areas where commercial sex take place. And that was back in 2011, 2012, we didn't even know what human trafficking was at the time. And I recovered them, and we generated our first human trafficking investigation based on the fact that they were recovered in areas where commercial sex take place, based on the fact that she was involved in commercial sex facilitated by a trafficker, which was /pimp, and his friends. And so we generated our first case. We reached out to some local counterparts who was working their first case and my federal counterparts, and we got our first human trafficking investigation. We were successful at it. And since then, I started working human trafficking investigations. I did it for over 8 years. We grew from that one case to actually creating a human trafficking task force, which I was chair of that task force for many years, for like 7 years. I ran that task force. We created that, and then we also had federal human trafficking cases that we worked. And the good thing about it is that I never lost a human trafficking case. So every case that I presented locally, statewide, and federally, I won. And the only reason I won is because I'm passionate about it, and I understood victimization, and not me, the team won. So I understood it took the community, it took the victim advocates, it took the analysts, it took a team of us in order to understand what we had and to go forward to fight human trafficking. And we never looked back. And we did an amazing job successfully. The prosecutor who prosecuted our cases, they understood human trafficking, and we grew from that. And we have grown since then. I also traveled throughout the country in the state of Florida, speaking and teaching about human trafficking to other law enforcement, so they can learn how to combat and fight human trafficking. I did that for many years. So I did it up until the time where National Center of Missing and Exploited Children up here in Alexandria and DC area reached out to me, and they wanted me to come be a supervisor for their sex trafficking team. They gave me a good offer that kind of forced me into retirement early for law enforcement. And I took that up, and now I'm making a difference nationwide to fight human trafficking. And I partner with International Association of Human Trafficking Investigators. I'm a partner with them. I'm a member of their team. Jeremy Lewis is CEO of them, so I do work with them. And I work for National Center of Missing and Exploited Children right now. So that's a little bit about what I've done.
Awesome. And I think where I want to start, Maurice, because we've been talking a lot about human trafficking here at Stop Now, and what the victims and survivors go through and what we can do to help. But for those out there that might just be catching on to this issue, because I think a lot of people, when they hear human trafficking, when they hear sex trafficking, they might be thinking about what they see in the movies or on the TV show. But just as somebody who's been working in this field for a long time, what's kind of the reality of what these kids, what these young women go through?
I mean, that is the number one question that we try to educate and teach people all over this country. We have domestic human trafficking, right? So when people think human trafficking, they think you abducted, you snatched up, and you sold somewhere else, right?
Mm-hmm.
No. It's domestic human trafficking, what we have here in the country. And it's so lucrative and so financially, what's the word? Financially easy to gain for the traffickers based on the fact that, let me explain to you before I go into the difference. The most simple thing that I can explain to you, if you take a kilo of drugs, cocaine, right?
Mm-hmm.
You chop up that cocaine, you sell it individually, right?
Yeah.
You sell it by, you sell it, you out of this product, what do you got to go do? You got to go buy some more.
Yep.
Right? You got to re-up. You got to go buy more drugs so you can cut it up and sell it. You can take a human being, take that one human being, and you can sell that product over and over and over again.
Mm.
You can take that one person and make profit off that one person over and over again. You don't have to re-up, right? You can get more girls and then sell them the same way, but you don't have to. It's profitable for the traffickers, right? They can take one person and make $5,000 to $10,000 in 5 hours, probably 5 to 10 hours. They can make that, in one day. That person has been raped constantly, has been mutilated, sodomized, all kinds of things that happen to this child or female or male victim, right? But yet the money goes straight to who? The pimp, the trafficker, right? The person who exploited them. So those are things that been going around as long as we know it, right? As long as we know it. It's been glorified through the hip hop community, pimping. It's been glorified through the through all type of communities, through the the Russian mafia, right? Just having girls at strip club, having girls all over, strip clubs in general. The white collars community, white collars go to strip clubs, businessmen go to strip clubs. They sitting at home at convention centers. I'm at hotels while they go to convention centers. They're online looking for women. They they order up a girl. The girl come to the door. What do? They have sex with the girl and send them on his way. They don't know that girl that walked through the door is possibly sick. Well, they probably don't care. It's 15 or 16 years old.
Right.
They don't care that she got to leave there and give the money to the trafficker. They can care less. All they care about is what they got out of her sexually. So it reached all communities, right?
Yeah.
It reached every type of communities. And one
I was just gonna say you right outside of DC, like I'm sure, like a lot of politicians get caught up in that type of stuff. Yeah.
So one thing that we noticed when we first got into it down in Florida, where I'm from, is that we thought it was a misconception. We thought it was just a certain group of people, right? We looked at it as a certain group of people, and it changed us just like that when we started arresting and locating the buyers, the buyers are all people, the traffickers are all people, and the survivors and victims are all people, are all races. You know what I mean? So you can't go into it looking at it as one particular way. You have to look at it as a generalized, and that's how you be effective and successful when you don't put one thing in one bucket, right? All the eggs in one bucket. You have to look at it as a whole. And so one thing that I encourage the community to look for what trafficking is, like I said, you can have a female or a young boy who's vulnerable, and you take that and you groom them by manipulating them, right? Let's say you have some runaway kids, right? And they're on the street and they meet this guy who's flashy or this female who's flashy, and they have nothing else, going for them, right? What do? They reach out to them, they're vulnerable. The person manipulate them and get them to sell themselves over and over again, right? But then again, another misconception is that his runaway kids are what they call throwaway people who's not wanted. That's a misconception. I had 2 cases where it was a girl who continued on coming back home to her parents. She was gifted. She made straight A's. She was always home, right? But on weekends, and she'd get home late from school. Parents didn't think anything because she was making good grades and she was coming home. On weekends, she was at a friend's house. that she told her parents. They believed her because they communicated with the friend. Yeah, she's over here when she wasn't. On weekends, she was being sold. She was traveling from Miami to Tampa to Jacksonville and Georgia. She was being trafficked out of those places on weekends. I mean, having sex with 22 to 23 guys a day, being raped over and over again. And she was only 15 years old, and she was coming home. Mom noticed something about this child because she was raped by one of the Johns because he could not perform sexually, so he got upset and raped her. He sodomized her. When she came home, mom noticed something wasn't right with her. She was bruised. Mom took her to the hospital, and that's when I got called in and started the investigation. So one thing I want to stress from people to understand is it's right up under your nose. You see it, you walk past it. Some people glorify it, think the pimp culture is cool. They don't understand how real it is and what it really looked like from a survivor eyes on what really happened to them when that door closes, right? And so signs to look for is someone who's vulnerable. Somebody, if you have a young lady or a young boy who have a cell phone or new tattoos, or they have things that you wonder, how can they get those things? How can those things be provided to them, right? Like anything, just use common sense, right? They're not coming home often, right? They truant from school. They truant, right? Those are signs to look for. Their behavior change, right? Just look into it more. Some of my cases, was solved through parents just seeing something not right with their child, and they call us and we look more. So those are things to look for as well.
And one of the things that JK always wants to know about when we had these discussions, Maurice, and I think you can specifically speak to this, is, we talk about what happens with the victims and the survivors of this, but a lot of times what happens to the offenders, to the people that are, pimping and exploiting these kids? Where's the justice? Like, is that something that you kind of run up against, is making sure that those people get what they got coming to them, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, so me being victorious in the cases that we have won and that that was properly prosecuted, we were victorious to a certain degree, right? Because you tell me if this child is ever going to be the same again.
Right.
So what is being victorious? Yes, the guys we have been arrested. Yes, they serving, some got life felons. So it's a life felon to traffic a human being, right? So every person except for 2 took a plea deal for my case. The other 2 went to trial, they were found guilty. The one that, my federal case, the plea deal was only 15 years for the federal case. However, the federal judge, so when I did my investigation and when I did my report for that particular case, I was very descriptive and I was very detailed on the victimization on what happened to this child, meaning the fact that everything she told me, how she was raped over and over again, I was detailed in describing her victimization. So that's important because when the judge read that, even though the plea deal was only 15 years, during sentencing, the judge said, the family was crying out for, please have pity on him, please have this on him, right? But the federal judge who understood human trafficking, who understood, who read our report in detail, he sat back, he said, okay, you finished, family? They're like, yeah, we finished. Everybody finished, yes. He said, well, I understand that the plea deal was only 15 years. He said, but what you and your friends have done to these children is something I don't take lightly. And based on reviewing these, the allegations and the detective, reports and taking all the evidence in, he said, I don't agree with the 15 years. He said, I'm gonna give you 30 years federal time because what you did with these children is something we don't take lightly, and the child's gonna have problems for the rest of their life based on what you did to him. Yeah. So, and he still, and so the judge said, well, I still don't think that's enough. He said, but I'm gonna, double that 15. I'm gonna give you 30 years. And we identify him in the bank robbery too. So he had additional 15. So he got 45 years federal time. Was that justice? Yeah, to a certain degree. He didn't walk away from it.
Right.
But true justice comes from if the children rehabilitate and they're able to get their life back on track. That's true justice right there for the child. The other cases, yes. So So every case I had, one died in jail. The rest of them did their time, 10, 15 years. One guy got 10, one guy got 15, another got 10, and so on. So that's the common one, the plea deals, between 10 and 15 years for plea deals for them. We still trying to find a way to go after the Johns, the buyers, the guys, the demand. If you have a demand for it, right, you still have people exploiting children and exploiting human beings. So the demand, we try to take down the demand. So the charges is very light on the buyers. I think as a community, we need more stronger laws and tougher laws for the buyers. Mm-hmm. And the reason why that's difficult is why? Because some of the buyers are who?
Mm-hmm. The politicians, okay? The lawyers, the preachers.
So you wonder why we have pushback on changing those laws. And so once we able to push that stronger to have the laws more feasible to go after these buyers, I think the demand is still going to be high, and the opportunity to exploit a human being is still going to be there.
Mm. Yeah, we're here with Maurice Edwards on Stop Now and having a fascinating conversation. Maurice, I kind of want to turn to the side of the victims, the survivors. When you kind of see what these young boys and girls have gone through, like what are some of the, you don't have to get into the details, but like what's kind of something that you see in terms of what they've been through and the road that it takes to kind of get back to being whole again?
Yeah, so let's start with the road that they take. I always give examples because that explains it more to you. Mm. Take a child who was convinced that this lifestyle is cool based on social media and the style of life and the outcome. You take that child, you put her, you get a guy who we thought that these guys and females are just dumb, ignorant people many, many years when we first got into it. But if you're able to take a person and convince them to sell their own body and give you all the proceeds, you're not a complete idiot. So that's one misconception that you can think that these guys are idiots, but they're not. They're very smart and intelligent and able to manipulate a human being to sell themselves.
Yeah.
So you take that and then you take the child victim or the adult victim, and then you take them and they now hooked on you. For example, a young child who never had sex, have sex with a man who changed their life. She fall in love with him. He convinced her to sell her body. Mm. So the same guy, her boyfriend, convinced her to sell her body over and over again, right? And you can only use your imagination what it looked like, what it really looked like out there for them to have to go through that type of life. Mm-hmm. You take them, and now you have them, and then and then you take that, survivor, and then you take her, and then through her victimization, she's been victimized and beat down, and now you recover her, and she's like, I'm not a victim. What are you talking about? And she run again back to the trafficker, and she run back to him, and she continue running back, and she run, and we rescue them, and it go back to us who specialize in this, right? We don't give up. Okay. Not one have we gave up on. We continue on going back, recovering them, finding them, and recovering them. One of my survivors, I told her, I said, I'll never give up on you. I said, and she said, why? I said, because not only I care, because I care about you and I care about you beating this, because you got to beat it. Mm-hmm. And she said, no one ever cared enough. And so, again, remember I said the team, the team aspect of it? Yeah. So it's me and my victim advocate. We wouldn't be successful without our victim advocates, right? Because they there from the beginning all the way to the end. Mm-hmm. And when I say end, we continue on doing follow-ups with all our survivors to make sure they have that rehabilitation and that recovery system in place in order to assist them on rehabilitating, right? To assist them with their recovery. Because the recovery just don't stop when we rescue them. I mean, when we help them, right? Yep. It doesn't stop then. It doesn't stop when we arrest the bad guy, he's sent away to prison, right? It doesn't stop then. It never stops. So to answer your question, what it looks like for them is us continuing building their life to build that recovery system to help them rehabilitate and help them overcome the obstacles, the mental challenge that they had, right? Because we got to break that, their health, their body have to get back right, right, from all the injuries. So we have so many housing, schooling, right? Those are all the things that we consider when we try to rehabilitate them to get back into their normal, what we perceive as a normal life,
Right.
but to get them back on track. And it also include family members, their friends, because we have to think about their surrounding circle. So we have to include all of that in order to help rehabilitate them, to get them back on track. And it doesn't stop. It's a long effort, right? So that's important.
And JK, I was just gonna say, JK, do you have any questions for Maurice?
Yeah, thank you, Nate. Maurice,
Why don't you say, got to put that in the keychain right now, instant.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so as a federal agent and also with your expertise and being a deputy sheriff and whatnot, like your profile looks so fascinating. Do you find any discrimination in races when it comes to this human trafficking thing? So, I mean, like, have you had the experience of handling with the labor trafficking particularly, and how important it is? Again, I have another follow-up question to it. How important is it to protect the identity of that victim?
Okay, so the first question, did you say about the, I couldn't hear you, I'm sorry. You said the racial barrier?
Yes.
Or no?
Discrimination between the races, like in terms of law enforcement handling the cases and prosecuting it.
Okay, got it. So let's start the first one. So the racial barriers for in reference to human trafficking, there is none. And that's one misconception that you have to think about and remember. I can't sit here and say there's a racial barrier or this one particular race that the demand is high for. I would never do that. Let me tell you why. Once you focus on one, you're missing so many on the other side, right? So you can never focus on one type of area. The demand for any type. You got a white businessman that go to a conference who may want a black female because they never had one. So they order one up online, right? You may get one who looking for Asian. And so the traffickers got to make sure they have a diversity of women on what they call a stable, which I think is the most degrading thing you could say, like a horse stable. But that's one of the terms they use. But on their roster or team, they got to have diversity. Because diversity, the demand, they got to make sure they have that product in order to give the demand, right? To give to the buyers.
Yeah.
So you can never make that misconception what type of race or demand for it. So I can't say on if I see one particular race more than another, than the other, because I don't. So I can't say that. Labor trafficking. So there's two types. You got. Let me explain something to you. Another misconception. I love going over those. Smuggling versus human trafficking. Some people confuse the two. Smuggling is a crime against the country, the border, right? Whatever country it is. So you got to smuggle them into the country, right? You smuggle them in, that's a whole crime. So I would charge them with human smuggling, right? If you smuggle someone in, I would charge them with that. Now, if they smuggle them in and say, y'all free to go, buy, run, then I charge them with human smuggling, right? Now, once they get here, what do they do with them? If they decide to sexually traffic them or labor traffic them, that's a whole charge right there, right? So you got two charges. They smuggle them in, then they human traffic them by either labor trafficking or smuggling them in. The demand for labor trafficking, what key states that human trafficking lead, right? California ranked number 1, Texas ranked number 2, Florida ranked number 3. Why is that? Why do California rank number 1? Why Texas rank number 2? And why Florida rank number 3 in human trafficking, sexually and labor trafficking? Of course, because the demand for cheap labor in all 3 states. Hospitality industry, right?
Those are the biggest states.
The biggest state. So that explains it all right there with the labor trafficking. To get a successful conviction with labor trafficking, a little more difficult than sex trafficking. The elements is the same. However, the cooperation is more difficult because they don't know they've been trafficked. They think this is working off of debt because they got them over here. They got to pay that debt off, right? So it's very difficult getting that. However, we're always up for the challenge. And the laws is very light on that too. So the laws is very a little more difficult when it comes to labor trafficking. But we still have those opportunities in order to rescue them. We have the Victim Act, the Victim, the Legal Victim Act, right? And what that is that protects, if you cooperate with law enforcement, if you cooperate with the prosecutors, we have a legal team, federal legal team, local legal team that can get you off, to get you here, to get your, your green card and your citizenship here in the States. So that's an incentive that we have for that, right? Which is huge, and I'm really appreciative of that, because that helped us get the cooperation we need as far as labor trafficking. I hope I explained everything in labor trafficking that you need to know, gist of it.
Yeah.
Okay. And then
I appreciate that because we hear a lot of story on labor trafficking. It's so hard for people to come forward, as you said, right? Because unless you give a witness protection or something, you don't know where you are going to end up with. As you said, right? It's not about the green card process or even the citizenship. How long this time frame takes, right? For example, let's assume I'm a victim. What is the process, right? I make a complaint and then I lose my job. How do I survive? What is the time frame for the law enforcement to take action on these cases?
So the victim, so we recover a child or adult victim in a labor trafficking sting, right? We recover them. We connect, of course, like I told you, our victim advocates is there from day one. We bring them to every scene. They're there with us. They start the process. Our legal, being the chair of the task force, I made sure we had a whole legal team. We assigned them to their own attorney, right? And it's all funded, right? Pro bono work, right? We assign them to their attorney from the beginning. They have that. They have a victim advocate and their attorney from the beginning, and they working with them from day one. The resources they need. You said that, what are they gonna do about work because they lost their job? Well, what do you need? You need housing, right? Our victim advocate make sure they get housing. When they need food and care, our victim advocate set that up for them, right? And housing, food. If they have children, our victim advocate provide services for that. So why the process? The process could take years. To be honest, it can take years, but during that process, we have the resources to accommodate them through the process, right? And so that's what's important. We have those resources for them. And the whole time they continue on cooperating with us. As long as they're cooperating through the whole investigation and during that time frame, we're working with them to provide those resources. So they're cooperating through the whole thing, through that time frame. Cooperation is the key.
Absolutely. We're talking with Maurice Edwards from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Just years of experience in this field. I think a question a lot of people that might be watching Maurice might be having is, well, what can I do, right? Like, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a judge, I'm not a cop, I'm not a politician. Like, how can I help these kids that are being exploited, that are being snatched up and sold? Like, what can I do as a normal, regular, everyday person to help out with this issue?
So when you say like abduction, like you say snatch up and sold, so I know that's a conception that that you have, which is okay. So the reason why I'm going to say is because because I don't want the community and people to think that that's what it is.
Okay.
Mentally snatched up, mentally taken, right? Because they control the mind, they control the body, they control everything else.
Yes.
And that's what domestic human trafficking is. Snatching up their mind, snatching up the control by controlling them through their mind and their body, right? So that's what it is. Abduction, do we have abduction? Yes. Do we have abduction and enforcing and trafficking? We have that. We have it to the point, once they already got their mind control and the girls try to get away, they'll snatch them out the car and say, you coming back to me, you coming back, right? So as far as kidnapping and enforcing them and then lock them in a room and beating them, we have that, yes. I say about maybe, don't quote me on this because I'm probably inaccurate, but all I see is maybe 2%, 3% of them locked in a cage and locked in the basement and been sex slaved. Yeah. No, it's so open right in front of your face. that you just have to open your eyes and get educated about it. It's right in front of your face. It's not in a basement being locked up and guys going out there having sex with them. It's right in front of you. The girls walking freely, being controlled by the trafficker right in front of you, right? So that's what it really looked like. Domestic human trafficking is that. They got smart when they lock them in the basement. They have them walking around and selling them that way. So what a community can do is doing exactly what they're doing right now, listening to you, right? Learning more about it, sharing what you have learned, not just from my lips, but going out and researching, doing more training, doing more education, learning more, and not just learning for yourself. Take what I told you, take what you have learned, and share it with your neighbor, share it with your family. Continue on sharing the information about domestic human trafficking and what's going on in this country with human trafficking and sharing it with others. That's what you can do.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Again, I appreciate the correction, Maurice, because yes, I think that image that people have, the misconception that you're talking about is like a Liam Neeson and Taken. Like I know where I'm gonna find you, but it's right in front of your face. It's right in the community, and it's something that a lot of people do need to be more educated about. So that at the end of the day, these are our kids, these are our neighbors, these are our our community, and we got to stand up for them. So we appreciate,
absolutely right.
We appreciate your time, Maurice. Any final things that you want to say to the folks out there that might be watching, and definitely like any hotline numbers that people can call, promote everything that you can, brother, because we appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today.
So I want everybody to know that to continue on learning, to continue on going above and beyond, and to understand what a human trafficking really is. We have a hotline number, but there's several hotline numbers. And this one I'm going to give you is 1-888-373-7888. 1-888-373-7888. And that's the international human trafficking hotline number. And the reason I gave you that one, because it don't matter where you at in the country or in the world. You can call that, give them a location and say, hey, I think I have a potential, or I may have someone that's been trafficked, or this person may have been trafficked, or based on this may be happening. And they would take that down and they'll send it to the local law enforcement agency in that area where you at. So that's important. I really wanted to give that information to you, because that's really important to give out no matter where you at. And for example, I got a call, this lady who took one of my classes. She was at a hotel. She was on an elevator, and the young female that was near another male kept looking down. So she asked her a question, how you doing today? The guy responded, we doing well. She said, oh, okay. She asked her, so I like your shoes, they look nice. The guy responded, yeah, I got them for her, they look nice. And then she said, well, your hair look nice too, you look very pretty. And the guy was like, yeah, like she's doing good. She kept looking down, she didn't respond. She's like, oh, no, something wrong with this.
Right.
So she followed him out the elevator, and she got the tag number and she sent it in to us, right? And it started an investigation for us. Of course, don't get involved, do it as a distance, but it just wasn't right. And she's like, just knowing what you taught us to be observant, to look at your surroundings, right? And to not be closed-minded and be blind to it. She said, that's what helped me in order to make that call into the hotline. And so that's extremely important, to be observant and not be closed-minded. So that's one thing I want to leave with everybody here, and to continue on being educated, to continue on going out, to learn more about domestic human trafficking, and to not just have the misconception that it's just of young girls, young boys. I speak on young people, but of course adults. I had a lot of adult cases as well, because my adult cases usually was drug dependency. They controlled them through drug dependency. They needed drugs, so they controlled them by providing the drugs, and in return they were selling themselves. Right? They controlled them by force, by coercion, by fraud. They controlled them by those three elements: force, coercion, and fraud. They controlled them by those three elements for our adult victims. They controlled them by that, by threatening them, by beating them, by drug dependency, right? And so that's how I got those cases through their cooperation. So it's not just children, it's not just adults, it's not just females, it's males too. vulnerable males who've been sold out there, especially young boys. So those are things to look for. Keep your eyes open and continue on educating yourself.
Absolutely, because I'm glad you brought up that last point there, Maurice, because we have talked to therapists and law enforcement officials and lawyers and people over the past year that were saying, like, because of the pandemic, like, a lot of people got forced into that lifestyle through landlords or through, people that they owed money to, but that they couldn't pay because of everything that was going on with the pandemic. And so it's like, you never know who's going through something. So you're right. You just have to kind of be aware of what's going on in your community.
You're absolutely right. You have to.
So JK, any final thoughts before we wrap things up this week?
Yeah, it's a long road. I mean, Maurice, we thank you so much for taking the time, even when you are out, and we really appreciate that. And we think that, like, it's a long struggle for people who are involved with big corporates, and fighting against them is a hard one. So how do you anticipate that, and how do you tackle those things? With that thoughts, we can end our this week conversation. And we thank you so much for helping us out with this mission.
You're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. Again, Maurice Edwards, criminal justice and human trafficking expert. We thank you so much for your time, man. And again, you have an invitation to come back anytime in the future that you want to talk about these issues.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you all for watching. Bye for now.